Hello and welcome to my channel. Today we are joined by Julie Hiner. I hope I pronounced that right. We're going to be talking about book launches and just the virtual, how to set them up and stuff. And that is an awful introduction to this video, but that's what we're doing today. Hi, Julie. Do you want to talk a little bit about yourself before we dive into any questions?
Of course. First of all, thank you for having me, Liz. I'm really excited about this. And just a little intro. Yeah, this is the first time I've been asked to talk about a launch specifically on an interview. And I just had one and it went, I think for me, better than expected. I knew what my goals were, and in the confines of the virtual world, I reinvented what I would normally do as an in-person launch and was just thrilled with how it turned out. So I'm really excited to be here today to chat about that and hopefully share any little tidbits that would be helpful to other people that are trying to do the same thing.
Yeah, I know. I attended your book launch and it was so fun and inventive, and I loved it so much. And that's why I reached out. I was like, oh my gosh, I need to pick her brain.
Yeah.
So before we dive into any book launchy questions, I just have a couple before. And the first one is, can you give us a quick elevator pitch of your two books, Final Track and Acid Track?
Yes, definitely. I'll just give you a quick look because the look is really important. So this is the first one in the series, Final Track, and the back looks like this. So good old 80s cassette. And then the second one in the series is called Acid Track, and the back takes you back to the LP world. So the quick rundown is the first one is basically an 80s metal murder. It's serial killer versus detective. It's set in the 80s and it's infused with 80s metal, which is why the look of the book. And the second one is a clear sequel. We get lots of characters back. We get new characters. It's a 70s acid rock laced serial killer versus detective. So it's still in the 80s. So lots of room for 80s metal in there. In addition to that, we get some great 70s acid rock, which is actually becomes part of the investigation.
Nice.
And so that's the rundown.
I'm so excited to read them. I bought them both as ebooks, so I have them on my phone and my iPad, not iPod, iPad.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just really excited to read those. What are you currently working on? I know that you are part of an anthology.
Yes.
So are you working on that right now, or are you focusing on book 3, or where are your priorities at this current moment in time?
Both of those. So book 3 in the series I had written before launching the second one. So now I've actually gone back. I haven't, my editor booked for May. So I'm deep in the smoothing out of that one. I'm about halfway through. But what I did was I really launched myself into that to get a good handle on it. And now my two top priorities are to finish that. And I am working on an anthology. So I'm really fortunate. I mostly write dark crime right now, but I have started to branch into pure horror, which was my intention when I first started my website and my author path. So I've been really fortunate to meet Daniel Wilcox, who I see as a modern horror king. Love his work, got to meet him through a fantastic writing group that he runs. Long story short, we worked on some things together, and I think what we see as good horror, it is just very aligned to what we love in writing and what we look for in writing. So we're co-editing a horror anthology right now called The Omen's Call, and the submissions just closed. It's basically, we're looking for really dark, atmospheric, grim tales based on the idea of some kind of omen or signal or something. And so now we're deep into going through the over 200 stories that we got and picking the best ones out of that, which is a really tough but really good experience for me.
It sounds like a lot of fun. I organized an anthology once and it was so much work.
It is. I know Daniel's done this before, and what I really admire about him is that he quickly learns from doing something and applying what he's learned. And his process for this the second time around is really tight and it's just efficient. It's going super well. The book is being published under his Devil's Rock publishing company. Thus, I say why we're using his process, and also because he's got the experience of doing this before. Of course, I want to leverage what he's learned.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a couple of little publication questions here. Were there things in the publishing process that you did differently from your first book to your second? So I don't like editors or like just the process of doing things in general, or was there anything kind of different you did between the two?
Yes, I did use the same editor, but I think I may have found her in a serendipitous moment in life at a horror conference, actually. Just turns out that she is sort of not sort of, she goes above and beyond in terms of her dedication to her clients and the quality and the detail of the feedback that she gives, which is really fit for what I was looking for. And just sort of to top that off, she has quite the background in forensic psychology. So because my investigations in my books are very detailed and involved, that was a really good fit. So there was no need to find a new editor. So I think what I would say here is I kept a lot of it the same, the things that were working, the things that didn't work quite as well the first time, I did differently this time. So when I launched the first book in this series just over a year ago, I focused completely, honestly, pretty much completely on the in-person launch and didn't really have an understanding or any experience in selling my book online. Now, that's fine. I think you can only do so much at one time. And I had, I was new at the fiction author. I had done a nonfiction, but it's completely different. So this was a new website, a new Instagram, a new Facebook, a new everything. And so I think I did as much as I possibly could while still doing it well. But as a result, I ended up focusing totally in person. And the launch went really well, but then I was kind of left with this nothing going on online. So as I was finishing book 2 and going through the process of packaging it, I learned a lot about how to sell books online. Now, of course, it takes time, it takes practice, but I have seen a difference in this launch of book 2 compared to 1 in terms of actually getting some notice and getting some sales. So that's one thing I did different, is my launch plan now included the in-person launch, which was turned into a virtual launch because of COVID. However, we'll get to that. I treated it as an in-person launch as much as I could. But then I also, as part of my launch plan, I had in mind advertising online and having a sale of the ebook online and things like that, and pre-orders. And so there was a whole new world opened up for me there. And again, I would say for anyone going in, bite off what you can chew. As you write books, you can learn more and more. Don't panic if you can't do it all at once, because in retrospect, there's a lot there to learn, and there's no way you can do everything at one time. But that was the primary thing I did differently, was having that online presence leading up to and following the launch.
All right. Who did your covers? I love them so much, so I just had to know.
Thank you. And I did. And I'll be really honest, there's no right answer. And everybody's going to say that. I ended up going with my gut. So when I created the first one, I had a really clear vision. I wanted to make sure that I was conveying that this is about death. There is murder in here. But I also really wanted to convey the 80s metal. And I did a lot of looking around, but what I had in my mind just wasn't out there. So I was aware that, this can be a bit of a risk, going off and doing your own custom thing. But I needed to. With my gut, it just really showed what the story is about more than any of the pre-made or custom work of other people that I was seeing out there. The other part of it is that when you go into writing a book, it is a lot of work. And in the end, what really helped me is when one of my friends said, well, make sure you are clear with yourself about why you're doing this. And now I've had a long career in IT, and this is like my second go at having a focused path in life. So to me, yes, I'd love to make enough money to fund every book and every project. However, my primary goal is to make sure that I am happy with these books that I put out. They are my art projects, and I want to feel really good and satisfied that I put out what my vision was. And so thus I just cut the cord, made the covers myself. So the first one is a photo. This is actually someone I know. She was kind enough to do an 80s glam shoot with me. And I also knew a photographer that he's just really creative and he's open to anything. The second one, given that we couldn't really do in-person photo shoots, I did go with licensing a photo, but then also the license agreement is that you can play around with it. So I did make it darker and more kind of horror looking or gloomy looking to make sure that the darkness there was conveyed. Now, just a note, I did have experience. I created my own cover when I did my nonfiction book years ago. So I had some basics in using Photoshop. And also I do have an IT background, not to say you have to, but I do think that my comfort level with software tools is somewhere that enabled me to go in and just start playing around. So a lot of people I meet, they choose not to do their own because they know I don't want to spend all this time. For me, what I've realized is I love playing with the photos and creating the look. And because I enjoy it so much, it's not so hard for me to put all that work in and all those hours in because I really, really enjoy doing it. But yes, I did create. So I guess I'm going to have to create the one for the next book now because I'm on a roll apparently. So.
Speaking of the next book, do you have a release date in mind? Like
yes, yeah, I definitely see it being released. So the first one was January of 2020, right? And then the one I just released was March 2021. I had an idea to do them within a year. At the time that January was approaching, I did feel I just needed a little more time. And the other part of it was I was kind of on the fence about wanting to see if things were going to reopen and I could do an in-person launch. But that became clear that it was going to take more time. So I set a date. So I feel like within a year is a really good target because I don't think you want to wait. If you can, I don't think you want to wait years. You want the people that have been interested and have read the first book and read the second book, you don't want to keep them waiting too long. You want to pull that along. But at the same time, the books are full novels. And because I do all the work myself, I do want to give myself ample time. Also, if we wait another year, there is a chance we could do both an in-person and a virtual event. And that would be really cool, especially if I don't want to give too much away, but if the same characters don't all come back, if we move into another prong of the story, it would be kind of nice to have a party as part of the woohoo, the trilogy is there, right? So yeah.
That'd be really cool to have like in person and virtual. That'd be cool.
Yeah, I think it would be. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. The next question was tell us a bit about what activities you had at your launch party. And while you do that, I'm just going to come off the screen for a second because my computer's dying and I need to do that. So
yeah, I'll take it away. So the virtual launch that I just had, I planned a full hour of programming because as you can see right now in our virtual environment, if you're running this, you need to be talking and entertaining that entire time. So I had an hour program, and then I followed it by an hour of live music. A band that I had hired for the in-person launch last year, since the pandemic started, they had developed a very sophisticated live stream setup, and they were kind enough to join and take over the party for a good hour and do some 80s metal music in true flair of the series. So the first hour before the music started, what I did was I had a little bit of an intro, give people a little bit of time to come in. And then I had planned a menu, a cocktail menu. So what I did is we had one cocktail, and I went through the details of what was in it, gave people a chance to make their own if they were participating, and they had, if they were wanting to, they had a full party guide that had been given to them ahead of time. So you would know, what are the ingredients? I want to participate in these cocktails. We had trivia. And I had some great ebook packages by some really good authors. So we did some trivia about the books. We did some trivia about the 80s. We did some trivia about crime. And then I had a musical act, a local guy that I know, and he actually wrote trailers for both my books. And he's a great musician. He's got a beautiful little studio in his house. So he came in and did a couple songs, and it was brilliant. Then we went back, did some more cocktails, more trivia, and the trivia was great because it really got people involved. And then a duo that I know that runs a publication company here where I live, they were kind enough to come in and do a good 15-minute interview, and they made it funny, ridiculous, party style, and it was a great time. And then we had time for another cocktail and trivia before the band came in. Interspersed in there, I did do a couple readings as well. So we had a nice full hour to an hour and a quarter, and then the oh, and I almost forgot, we did a costume contest. So when people signed up, I had it set up that they could sign up for this, so I would know who do we have, and made it clear to them that you will have whatever, a minute or two to come on, show us your costume, tell us about it, do a little dance, whatever you want to do. We had about 6 people enter that, and it was like a 70s, 80s rock star thing, and it was a lot of fun. I gave out prizes, and yeah. So what I was trying to do was create something where, even though it was virtual, there were opportunities for people to interact and be and participate, and give them as close to a feel of an in-person party as possible, even though we are in a virtual world right now. So I think the important thing there is, if you are going to do, even if it's just a 1 hour, you need to be prepared in terms of what are you going to fill that hour with, and you may want to have a little extra in case things don't take as long, or in case there aren't as many questions from the audience as you're expecting. But make sure you've got a real clear layout of what you're doing, what order you're doing it, and practice the readings, practice answering the questions, or whatever it is you have planned. Just the more you prepare and practice, the calmer and smoother you'll be. I mean, I know it's just virtual, but still, you want to do a good job, and you want to come off like you are there and comfortable and present and know what you're doing. So that was a really long answer to fill in what activities we did. There were a lot of activities.
Yeah. Why did you choose to host the book launch party on Zoom? Were you thinking of other platforms, or did you, like, from the start know you were going to use Zoom?
Yeah, I chose Zoom because it enabled me to allow people to interact. So I've used StreamYard, I've used Facebook Lives, YouTube, and I often do a live stream where it may be me and one other person, but then anybody watching, they can ask questions in the comments, right? But they can't participate. And because I was really trying to recreate a party for this particular launch, I did choose Zoom. Now, I've been to a couple Zoom launches since the shutdown, and the reality is that most people that I was anticipating coming pretty much get the idea of Zoom. They know to mute when the program is going on, and they know how to use the chat. And for people that don't know, well, they can just keep it on mute and they don't have to come on the video if they're uncomfortable. They can just watch. So it enabled people to watch but also participate. So when we got to the part where we were doing like the trivia, for example, a friend of mine was watching the comments so that she could catch the first person to get it correct. So we had that whole comment section, but then we also have this here. When we got to the part where we were doing the costume contest, we could put a spotlight on whoever's turn it was to show us their costume, and then they could actually show their costume. So I needed something that wasn't just like a Facebook live stream where the people watching can't participate. It also enabled the band. They went above and beyond. They came in and had tested this out ahead of time, where I could go in their stream and they could come in my stream. So the people in the Zoom party could see me and them. And we could also spotlight people that were dancing in the party and just show other people, like, look, these people are dancing. This is fun. And also give them a chance to, oh, I'm on screen, I'm dancing. And it was just more fun. It was closer to the real thing. So I don't know if there are other things than Zoom that enable that interaction, but that was the primary reason that I chose to use Zoom.
Sorry.
That's okay. Hi.
You can say hi?
We've got a guest on the live stream.
Yeah. All right, go have a snack. How did you come up with the... a little quieter, please. How did you come up with ideas of what to do? So like the costume contest and having the band and stuff and the cocktails, like all that stuff. How did you come up with the ideas?
A good part of it was a continuation of last year. So when I did the in-party launch last year, it was an in-person party in a dive bar with a live band, and it was dress 80s metal if you want to, and a lot of people did. We got some great photos from that. So I was trying to create, if you go to a bar for a party with a band and you dress up and you're going to order some drinks and you're going to talk with other people, I was trying to recreate that. So the band was kind of an easy win because, like I said, it was the same band I'd hired last year, and they had a sophisticated stream set up. So it's just a matter of talking to them and getting that organized. The costume contest was a way to allow people to dress up if they wanted to and make it worth their time, because there were prizes and then they could come on and show off, whereas if you think, it's not like I'm going to this thing in person, no one's going to see me, they might not really think it's worth the effort, right? As for the interview and the trivia, like, I'm not sure. I guess some I've seen some launches do different variations of that. That was like, to do that, I'd seen other people doing similar things. The interview is often common. Somebody does some kind of little interview if you're at an in-person launch. So as a recreation of that, the trivia, I just thought that'd be really fun because it would be a way to get people involved in the comments and feeling like they're part of the party. The readings, it's funny because last year at my in-person launch, I wasn't planning to read. I know everybody does, but I was kind of terrified of doing it. And I was just planning on, the band will play and we'll gloss over the fact that I'm not going to read or say anything. Well, I had this lady specifically ask me to get up and read before the band started. So what can I do? This woman came on a really cold night to this bar to support my book launch. I'm not going to say no. And so I realized, you know what? Maybe I don't think it's interesting to hear me read for my book, but when I go to a launch, I want to hear them read something. And that's part of what people that come expect. So I had definitely planned that based on learning that people want that when they come to your launch. And really, I was just trying to create like, what would be a great 80s feel, so between the costumes and the cocktails were 80s and the trivia was 80s. It was kind of part of the whole overarching theme, really.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
What games or activities did you want to do but couldn't do because of the virtual limitations?
Well, it was actually surprisingly less limited than I thought. Of course, in person, we'd all be dancing, which last year it was amazing to see people getting up and dance and having a great time. The reality is, we did have an hour and a quarter of live music and dancing, and a lot of people were dancing in their living rooms. And part of the party package I gave out ahead of time did explain how you could clear your dance space, how you could practice. And I provided some dance lessons on my YouTube thing, which are really just supposed to be showing you some 80s metal moves, but also showing you how to let loose and just have fun. So I was trying to facilitate that. So I mean, other than really being in person in front of the band and having that nice, sweaty, great experience in a bar, we were less limited than I thought. I think if you're really creative about it, it's actually surprising how much you can do.
Nice. Yeah, it's it always surprises me when you can actually do like so much virtually. Like,
yeah,
it's crazy. How did you get in contact with some of the other people involved? So like the band, I'm trying to think of anyone else.
Yeah. Well, it was, I mean, I did have two musical acts. I did have the interview. I did have people helping me on the Zoom. So I think even leading up to my first launch last year, I like to socialize. I like to meet people. I like to be part of a community. So when I started writing fiction, I really threw myself into the local community and I met some really, really great people. And those people helped me last year in person. A lot of those same people helped me again this year, plus new people that I've met through writing groups, whether it be in person or through this online year. It's, don't be afraid to ask, because if somebody isn't comfortable or can't do it, they'll say no. But people you really gel with, they want to help you and they want to make it a success. As for the band, again, I refer to these serendipitous moments, but in life, when you really let go and you just go out and experience things, you're going to meet people, you're going to have experiences, and things are going to happen. So a friend of mine and I had gone out what happened now? We went out for the night and we went to a local place that has live music. And the band that I ended up hiring both last year and this year, they were playing. And we specifically went to this place because they had a dance floor and it was an 80s band that I'd heard about that was supposed to be really good. And I love 80s music. Well, we had such a great time. And the band kind of remembered us because we danced a lot, and when I dance, I'm really memorable, apparently. So anyways, I contacted them to thank them, but also to inquire, because it was a few months before my first launch. And I had this venue, they had a full setup. I could do a live band if I wanted to, I didn't have to. But I thought, I just feel like this launch would be so much more fun for people if there was live music. So it just worked out that we were able to negotiate something that worked for both of us. They were experienced, they showed up, they set up, they had full equipment there. And then I had been following them since the closure and seen how great their live stream was and had talked to them a number of times. So it was really an easy win to bring them in for the virtual launch, because I mean, they've been doing this virtual stream every week and they're keen to actually do more online parties if people are open to that. So this was really a win-win, because I got live music for my people and then they got their people to see what you could do if you booked a virtual party with them. So it just really turned out to be a really win-win situation.
Nice.
Yeah.
Which launch did you find was easier to organize, the in-person or the virtual?
For me, it was the in-person, because yes, you do need to find a venue, but I did have some experience from my nonfiction. I did an in-person launch, and honestly, there's a lot of venues, at least in my city, that if you're going to bring in a bunch of people, they're really willing to work with you and make it really, really easy. So really, you need the venue, and yes, you needed the band, and yes, you need to let people know what's going on. But once you were there at that party, I mean, if you think about it, when you're at an in-person event, maybe you do plan a little bit of a speech or, some readings, and then you have the band play or whatever. You're not necessarily going to have a band, but a lot of it is people mingling and visiting and having a good time. And that just comes naturally in an in-person environment. So you don't really need to plan an extensive program. And in fact, if the program's too long in an in-person launch, people get antsy. They don't just want to sit the whole time, right? So the virtual I did find was more work because, again, I needed to think about, well, for a full hour, I need to provide entertainment for these people. They can't just sit there and have a drink and chat. So it was more work to plan that whole program, communicate that program to people, and practice it and make sure it all looked my setup that I needed to get so that when I'm on the video, I did use Zoom, and yes, you can have backgrounds, but if you've noticed when you use those backgrounds, sometimes your hands and your face and stuff disappear. And I wanted to make sure they could see me, they could see the drinks, they could see the books. I didn't want to be disappearing. So I did put some effort into creating what kind of looked like a stage and getting some props and things like that. And the slideshow that I have going behind me, creating that. So for me, because I wanted to make it look like an in-person event, it was more work. Even if you do a simple stream with a simple background, you still need to think about what are you doing for that whole 30 minutes or 1 hour or however long it is. So it is more effort, I think, to work out the program part of things. The other part of it, before I stop going on and on, but there's a lot of information, is when you go to a book launch in person, well, you show up, you buy your book, the person signs it, you pay. So I wanted to create that, and I did. And what I did was printed books. I set up a local store on my website, and I had a delivery day where I went around the city and delivered all these books. So that was more work to get those books into those hands. But, the experience those people had by getting their author signed book delivered to them, and I wrapped them up fun, and I put in 80s candy, and I continued the theme. It was such a memorable experience for them, and they had this book in their hands a few days before the launch. So more work, but completely worth it to provide these people with an experience as close to possible as the in-person experience.
Which was cheaper? So I would assume that the online one was cheaper just because you didn't have to get a venue and everything, but I don't know.
The only reason the online one was cheaper was because I chose to hire a band for the in-person. I didn't have to pay anything for the venue. So surprisingly enough, in my city, and I'm guessing if you look, you could probably find this wherever you are. If there are probably a lot of venues that would be willing to waive any sort of fee if you're planning to bring in a bunch of people for that night, and these people are going to be buying drinks and having food, and there are a lot of venues out there that are in my city that are willing to do that. I did look at a number of them before I made my selection, and I even had to find one that had a stage and a proper setup for a live band, and that was actually pretty easy to do. So the only reason for me that the in-person one was more expensive was because I did pay that band to show up with their equipment and set it up and do a 2-hour show. So, I mean, it's only fair. You can't expect that for free. If I had taken that out of the equation, then the costs would have been pretty much the same. I did invest a little bit then in my room here to set it up a little differently for the party. Not a lot, but there was a little bit of a cost there. Yeah, so I actually think that they would be the same if you approach it where you do seek out a venue that is willing to work with you and find a win-win situation with them.
That's surprising. For some reason in my mind, I expected the live one to be so much more expensive, right? That's really interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought about they're so loud. I hadn't thought about, the whole bringing in people aspect for the venue and stuff. So that's really interesting to consider.
Yeah, I mean, some of them don't. Some of them are clear that there is a fee, but I looked at a few and it was surprisingly easy to find some that were not, that you could work out an agreement with without having to pay a fee. So I do encourage people to look at more than one spot before making that decision, for sure.
Which did you have more fun hosting?
Well, I mean, I was really surprised at how much fun the virtual one was, and I did put a lot of effort into making it what it was, and I had a lot of help too. But for me, just because, you know, the being having the experience of a live band and actually getting to dance with people, I love that experience. So I mean, that's always going to be more fun because I like that, be in a bar and sweat it out and dance it out and you've got the live band there. You can't beat that. But for like, if you didn't have a band and it was more of a typical launch where you're sitting in a bookstore or something like that, I mean, I think you could make it as fun or more fun in the virtual environment, really. And again, I was surprised at how much fun this was. We went on for, I think, 3.5 hours before there was about 6 people left at the end from the 40 plus that came. And I finally said, okay, I think I need to go sit down now. So.
Yeah. So you kind of already answered this one, but like, so in a world where COVID no longer is an issue, do you think you would lean more towards doing a virtual or in-person kind of launch?
Well, definitely have to do an in-person one for the next book in this trilogy, if we're allowed to do that. But, you know, I think the really cool thing about the virtual one was people like you. I mean, we don't live in the same city. And there were quite a few people that don't live in Calgary that were able to tune in. I had a guy from Australia tune in for a while. So, I mean, I think what I would do is I would actually expand this. And if I can do the in-person one, do it, but maybe have like a part of it that is also virtual. So, you know, maybe the first 30 minutes or 1 hour, you've got a program and you're including the people online. And in fact, if I did have another band or something like that, you could actually have a stream going so that people that were not in your city and not at that place with you, they could watch the program and watch the band, or interact in the program and then watch the band. I mean, I'm just brainstorming, but I don't see why you couldn't do both and then at least provide that stream or something for those people that aren't physically at that event.
Yeah, doing some sort of like hybrid launch would be really cool.
Yeah, right?
Sure.
I think it would be cool, yeah.
Okay, and then this is our last question. And it is, any tips for people who are planning virtual parties?
Yeah, so if you want to, I mean, like I said, I was just kind of flabbergasted and excited at how well it went and how engaged people were and how much fun they had. And it was a lot of work, but if you can come up with, like, my books are pretty clear. It's 80s, it's murder. There's, you know, a lot of music inspired the stories and the scenes. So for me, that theme of 80s metal is really clear. So taking whatever theme you can pull out from your books and using that to sprinkle it, you know, can you have trivia that is related to that theme? Are there going to be drinks? Could you theme them? Are there prizes? Can you theme the prizes? My prizes were themed. Do people want to dress up? Can there be a theme? And it doesn't have to be those activities, but whatever activities you end up having, can you theme them somehow around what's in the book? And maybe for you it isn't a band, but like, could it be you have a guest that, you know, specializes in something to do with the theme, or you have an interview that pulls out that theme? I mean, there's just so many ways to do it, but I think that would help you center it. I would also recommend write out the program. I did a little book where I had pictures and descriptions, and I had a program laid out. You know, what am I going to do? How long do I think each things will take? And then I did do a practice run a couple days before. I had a couple friends help me, and we didn't do the whole thing, but we kind of did like a little walkthrough. What order are things going to go in? Does the setup look okay? if you are doing like just a simple live stream, it is a little easier in the sense that you're on and you're talking. You may want to think about how you're going to talk and look at the comments and how you're going to respond to those. In my case with the Zoom, I had a friend help by making sure people were being let in the waiting room. And I had another friend looking at the comments to make sure we knew who answered the trivia questions first. And are anybody asking questions? So don't be afraid to get people involved to help you out. Are there people you know that would be willing to do an interview or come in and do a reading of something else or a musical take on something, or anything you can make it interesting? Don't be afraid to ask other creative people that you know and that you admire your work, or their work is in the same vein as yours. So plan, prepare, think it through, do a practice run. Don't be afraid to ask people for help. And definitely, I think the theme really helps it elevate it from just a simple stream to more of a launch. Yeah.
Awesome. So there's no questions in the comments right now, but that's pretty much all we have for you guys for right now. If you have any questions and like while watching this on playback or anything, you can feel free to leave a question down in the comments, or you can contact Julie directly. She has, I think you have a contact thing on your website. You can contact her via like Instagram. That's what I did. All her links are down in the description below, and so are the links to all her books. So make sure you guys go buy those because I'm excited to read them, and I'm sure they're amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Julie. I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun, and all the best to anybody doing launches.
All right. So I guess that's all.
All right. Wrap.